You know, there are just some people out there that when you meet them, you instantly click with them. And my guest today is just such a soul. Her name is Therese Sharp, and she's a psychic medium. She lives in Lynchburg, Virginia. She is a very multifaceted creator. She's been a radio show host herself. She has authored a book that's about ready for publishing on ghosts, and she has a second one in the works. She's also working on a movie. So I just want to welcome you to my show, Teresa. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about what you do?
I'm also a Reiki Master, and I teach classes in that as well. I teach how to develop your psychic ability. I teach how to read the tarot, meditation classes as well. Like you said, I'm writing a book and working on a screenplay for one of the houses that I helped to cleanse, and actually have footage that's going to be included in that movie.
Oh, how exciting!
It's a friend of mine that purchased a house, and within 2 weeks of living there, she started having activity. The covers were thrown back off of her and then back on her. Boxes would move. Her two boys were experiencing all types of things. So she called me in, and I went over to do a cleansing. I took a video camera as well and recorded just a regular old tape recorder like we used to use, and set them upstairs and downstairs. And I have footage of a little girl that is walking across her bedroom from her bathroom and then turned around and went back.
Oh, wow.
Audio of the little girl talking to me. And, of course, I didn't see that when it was happening. It wasn't until later when I came home and was watching the video and listening to the tape that I actually heard that.
How exciting! Oh my God, how cool is that?
Yeah, and then we went back after seeing that, and I went back to see if I could get any more information, and the little girl actually appeared beside me. Unfortunately, the battery in the camera had died, so we weren't able to video that, but the lady that was helping me at the time could see her energy beside me, and the little girl explained what had happened. And apparently sometime in the late 1800s or middle 1800s, her and her family were running from a group of people and were killed on the spot that the house was later built. And she hid behind a rock and watched her parents die, and she died there with them. She was about 7.
Wow.
And I helped to connect her with her mother and father, and she went to the light with them. And the lady that lived there said after that she had no more problems with trying to keep the house warm. The telephones were working fine. It was lots and lots of things that had been happening prior to me cleansing the house.
Oh, that is magnificent.
Yeah, that's been about 10 years ago, maybe a little less. I don't remember the exact year, but yeah, and to this day, she's still not having any issues.
Oh, I can't wait for the screenplay to be released. We'll have to have you back on at that time. That is
It's a lot of work. I didn't realize how much work it was, but it's a lot.
Well, and you know, too, writing a book is not that. Your first book, I believe, was about ghosts. Is that right?
The first one finished. It's the one. It's called 13 Ghost Stories.
Oh.
And it's about, well, that story is in there that I just told you about, and several other ones that I've had encounters with over the years when I went in to cleanse a house.
A lot of times people think of psychic mediums like we are as helping them deal with their grief and connect with the people that they've lost that they want to know what happened about. But I don't think that most people, when they think of a psychic medium, think of someone that helps those on the other side also. I mean, there's some people I'm sure that are aware that service is done, but even in the process of a reading, in facilitating that communication between the two sides, we do help them. And what a phenomenal example of that. I'm so excited. I would just love to see that footage at some time, and I can't wait for that to come together. That's really
Yeah,
amazing that you were able to capture that. It is funny how, you know, how stuff like that gets embedded on recordings. I did a reading for someone one time, and I was talking to them about connecting with their guides, and they listened to the tape, and there were voices on the tape of her guides talking to her, but I didn't hear, I heard them clairvoyantly, but I didn't hear. I thought that was so cool, and I think that's just amazing to have caught, that much of an apparition, a physical uh, evidence of spirit being there.
yeah, it was very clear. It's a little girl with a long white dress, and you can tell she's got long curly hair.
Oh,
And she comes out of her bathroom, walks across the bedroom, turns and goes back to the bathroom. And as she goes into the bathroom, there's a bright flash of light. It gets out of sight of the camera.
oh, wow, wow. What's your first memory of seeing or hearing someone that's crossed over? What do you recall as your first encounter?
That's easy. I was 10 years old, and I was raised a Catholic, and I had a favorite priest. His name was Father Finnegan, and he passed away when I was 10. And my father took me to the church to view the body and say goodbye. And as we're walking down the aisle of the church, they lay priests out in state. They don't put them in a casket.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're walking down the aisle, I noticed that Father Finnegan sat up on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And he started talking to me, and I started talking back. I don't recall everything he said. I do remember as I was turning to walk away, he said, "You're going to do well in life." Prior to that, my father said, "Who are you talking to?" And I said, "Father Finnegan." And he said, "Well, he can't talk. He's dead." And I said, "Well, he's sitting up." So, of course, my dad had grabbed my hand, and we just kind of exited the church. And he said, "We don't want to talk about this."
It's funny how it's sort of considered like a less favorable topic. To me, it's one of the most fascinating ones, people's encounters. I read recently a statistic that I think it was 70% of widows see, hear, or sense their loved one, their husband after
Mm-hmm.
passing. That's a pretty high statistic. That's not like a wackadoodle statistic. That's a pretty substantive statistic.
My mother and father were open to this type of thing, but I think because there were other people in the church at that point in time, he didn't want me to say too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. That's the first memory I have. I'm pretty sure I had more before that.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. How long have you consciously been communicating with the other side?
I know I've been able to do it most of my life, and there, of course, in times, life takes over and you kind of put that to the side, but pretty much my whole life. I actually started helping people with it probably about 20 years ago. Doing readings, I do the tarot cards, and then I do psychic readings, and when I sit down to do a reading, I really never know if somebody's going to come through or not, and I always tell the people that it's not always the ones they want to talk to, it's the ones that want to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't dial 1-800-JOE, come back,
Yeah, I think the ones that step forward have the most urgent message for the person.
Yeah.
Not that the others can't be contacted. It's just they're the ones that have maybe an apology to make or an explanation, or maybe resonate better, you think, to the person that's either sitting or the medium sometimes too.
True. I just did a reading for a man from Fairfax yesterday. He came down, and he was in the military,
Mm-hmm.
and his friends had passed away, but I didn't know before that. And all of a sudden, the room started smelling really strong of gunpowder, and I got the name Brian, his friend that had died, and they were best buddies. And that was an interesting, because that's not what we sat down to do.
Right. It's so amazing the different and diverse ways that spirit communicates. What kinds of things have you experienced in the way that you've connected with spirit?
Well, it varies. A lot of times it's like I'm getting a memory of somebody else's life, and I'm seeing like a slideshow in my mind. I get images, and I give those to the person. I will get smells. A lot of times I will actually have an audible voice that I can hear. A lot of times I can see them. Usually out of my peripheral vision, I can see someone, but I know somebody's in the room with me when I feel a cold breeze go up my back, like somebody's opened the freezer on my back. So, it's a variable of how they communicate. And I guess it's on whatever level they're able to.
Yeah. Sometimes I get cold sensations if I'm going into some spiritually dense areas, but sometimes when I'm getting ready to bring someone through, I'll get like super hot. Like I'll have to take off any extra layers, not down to my skivvies or anything like that, but just, take off some layers of clothing because it just, I don't know, I just feel it. And I'm sure that it's related to spirit communication and because it's synchronistic with the timing of that. What other ways do you think that you've been maybe surprised by spirit communication or found unique in the way that they came through?
I have a lamp that sits beside my reading table, and a lot of times that will start to flicker.
Oh.
I've had times where it would go off. I would say, can you turn it back on? And it will come back on.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yes.
Different things will move, or I'll hear knocks. I never really know until they come through, but they have their way of letting me know they're here.
Yeah, I think you also have kind of a kinetic energy yourself, too. Do you ever have lights flicker or when you go by them or batteries drain or something like that?
I do, batteries especially, in battery-operated clocks.
Yes.
The clock in my kitchen constantly, I have to change that battery, and computers will mess up. Watches, I can't wear watches.
Yeah. Did you find that happened more after you got into being more connected, like through your work as a psychic medium, or?
No, it's been pretty much off and on all my life. Early on, I didn't connect the two. Like when I was in school and I'd wear a watch and would always stop. And I could never fix it, But now that I'm more seasoned in it, I know that that's probably what it was.
Right. So I started this show because I just thought it's so interesting, the viewpoint that I got as a psychic medium doing readings and, encountering things and experiencing things through the eyes of other people that have passed or seeing the other side. I know you have many experiences. How has seeing the world as a psychic medium affected the way that you see life in general?
Well, it's made me a lot more patient with people, and I have a deeper understanding of their feelings, like being a more sensitive to like an empath type thing. I've noticed that I don't get as impatient as I used to. The more I do this, the more I understand that people are operating from their best ability that they know how to do. And even though they're not aware of that, it really has opened my eyes to understanding how other people, their life, and it's helped me to be able to guide people to see it themselves.
Yes. That quietude of spirit is one of the things that I think drew us to each other. And one of the first things that we did was exchange readings with each other over the first, I guess, year that we knew each other. I've always appreciated that quietude of spirit, that you really radiate a very unconditionally accepting energy that's quite beautiful. And I think it does have to do with that, understanding the depth behind people's actions, not just, it's very easy to judge and say, well, they did that, they're mean. But,
yeah. Well, the thing I've noticed, too, is that when you start thinking from the viewpoint of that person, no matter who they are or what they're doing, is operating from a level of understanding that they only know. And it's a matter of when you know better, you'll do better. And I've been on both sides of that. I'm glad I'm on the side that I can be more patient with people and try to have a more understanding viewpoint on their life than I used to.
Yeah, that gives a great depth too. I think because of some of the media and maybe some bad examples, people sometimes think that it's kind of like spinning a lottery wheel. Is it a yes or a no? Should I stay or should I go? And I think being able to deepen, to go so far beyond a yes or a no, or to be able to gently render a no, honey, that's not going to work out for you, in a way that's compassionate and allows them to adjust to the deeper understanding, is really a gift. And you most certainly have that gift.
Well, thank you. I just feel that unconditional love, it is hard to get to the point where you feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's been a lot of times in my life where I've had situations happen to me that at that moment I could not understand unconditional love and why this person has done this to me or treated me this way. But there again, I go back to what I just said. They're doing the best they know how to do from where they've come from.
And I don't think we're like gurus or anything in the sense that,
No.
We don't maintain a state of perfection or something like that at all times. We do have human lives where we feel scared or vulnerable or hurt or grief-stricken too. But I think being able to go to that place of understanding is definitely an advantage.
Yeah, and what I've noticed that helps is forgiveness and gratitude are huge in healing. I've been through some difficult situations early on in my young adult life. When I hit 50, I realized, I've got to forgive these situations, not for them.
Mm-hmm.
More so for me, and to be grateful for having those situations happen to me.
Yeah, it's not thank you for the pain, it's thank you for the lessons they bring or the strengths that they bring out.
Absolutely, because had those things not happened, I wouldn't be able to come from a total place of understanding when somebody comes in that the similar situations has happened to them. That's one way this has changed my life.
And learning to move away from pressures, sometimes in the physical, if we were touching something that was burning hot, we would immediately retract our hand. But when we're in an emotional situation that's burning hot, sometimes we're just holding on and it's like, oh God, that hurts. Oh my God, that hurts so much. Oh, ooh, do you smell burning flesh? Oh God, that hurts. And we just delay our exit. And I think that sometimes those pressures in our life are given to us so that we move away from those pressures and take that path of self-affirmation and healing and least resistance.
And like you said, it's not your holier than thou type attitude.
No.
It's just experiences that you've been through, and it's just a matter of how you think about them anymore. Because we realize that we're only here for a short period of time. What we do with the time that we have is really important, and a lot of people waste a lot of time.
That's very key. Yes, a lot of people waste a lot of time. And sometimes it's in our perception of the situation so much. Very quick example, my air conditioning went out in my house. So it was like 88 degrees in my house. And I don't handle heat well. I don't know that anyone really does, but it just really messes with me. It just drains me. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, I really don't have the money for the service fee, even to find out what's wrong. And I went around for like 4 days sweating, holing up in my basement, trying to, just survive. And something struck me. I just thought, you know what? Yes, I can afford this. Of course I can afford this. Didn't have any clue how that was going to happen, but I just figured out I'm going to find out how much it is to fix it. So I called the company. They came, just sort of crossed my fingers and hoped. Turned out, after it was all said and done, $127. And if I had stayed in that mindset of I can't do this, it's not possible, I'm just going to have to suffer, I would still be sweating right now.
That's true.
And I thought, my God, how profound is it how we think about our lives? And speaking about our lives, I would love for you to share another story, if you will.
Oh, I'd love to. One comes to mind that I was in Connecticut. The lady had asked me to go into the house that she grew up in. When she was an older lady at that point, and they had turned this house into a three apartments. It was 3 levels and then a basement. And it had burned, the tenant on the second floor burned that apartment. So it was, all the tenants were out and everything was closed. And I went in to do a cleansing on it, and I started at the top level, came down, and got to the basement, and it's just like you see in the movies. And Connecticut is an interesting place. I love it. The entrance to the basement was under the stairs, and it had about 10 different types of locks on it. Slide locks, deadbolts, interesting. And so opened the door, and I realized I don't have a flashlight. So the lady I was with went and got a flashlight from the neighbor, and the steps going down to the basement were rocks that were stacked as stairs. It was a dirt floor basement, and certain areas had boards over it. And I went through with my sage and I was clearing and went through the whole basement and was back at the foot of the steps. And I was saying a final prayer. And in the far right corner, I saw like a little twinkling light start to manifest into a form, and then it became a man. And he came to me in like a jerky type motion. And the next thing I know, he's standing directly in front of me. And on a white T-shirt, jet black hair, and the prettiest blue eyes. I will never forget his face. And he told me to tell her that I'm sorry.
Oh.
And okay. And he just disappeared. So I was calling upstairs to the lady. She was taking notes, and she had left because she was so scared. But she just kind of ran out the door, and I didn't realize it. But
it was getting real.
No, it's way too real for her.
Yes.
This is the little, the legal pad is on the floor with the pen, and she's out of the car smoking a cigarette. So
probably 3 at a time.
Probably. God bless her. But yeah, I went upstairs. I told her about it. We left. She was very happy about that. And that evening, we went over to the lady's house that owned it. And she was staying in a temporary place. And I was telling her what happened. And turns out it was her father. And he had committed suicide in that corner. He had shot himself with a shotgun. And she pulled a picture of him out. And it was exactly what I saw. He was in a white T-shirt with this jet black hair and those beautiful blue eyes. That was an interesting experience.
Yeah, no, that is just, people talk about evidence in readings, and they sometimes think that has to be a name or an address or an answer to a particular trick question, like what was the pet name that my daddy used to call me by, or something like that. But it isn't in that. It comes, like you were talking about earlier, in so many different ways. And that evidence of his physical appearance and him apologizing and appearing in that place, that is just wonderful evidence. Yeah. We are right here at the bottom of the hour. If people want to find Teresa, she has a website, mystic-visions.webs. That's plural, webs.com. mystic-visions.webs.com. We'll be repeating that later, and we'll see you on the flip side of the hour here.
Now, back to our show, from a medium's perspective, with host, Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Welcome back. If you missed the first half of the show, you can listen to it and other episodes here on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel while you're there, if you will. If you would like to reach our guest, I want to repeat her website because we were kind of headed into the music. It's mystic-visions.webs.com. Psychic medium Therese Sharp, thank you so much for being on our show and for I just love you, but I also love having professional psychic mediums on the show because I get to talk shop and listen to stories and hear what's going on there. And I wanted to ask you, would you share another story with us? I don't think we can ever run out of stories. So,
Yeah. Well, there was one that was down in the country. I'm going to leave out the places and the names.
sure, I do the same. Yes. Uh-huh.
The day after Christmas. I do remember that very well because the lady that called me was taking a class from me. And her husband had just recently moved into this house that used to be a slave cabin. And at some point in time, of course, it was abandoned for a while, and then somebody bought it in the 30s and modernized it, put in plumbing, bathroom, kitchen, that type of thing. But not long after they had moved in, this lady was beginning to be physically and sexually attacked by an entity that couldn't see.
Do you think of them as like succubus?
An incubus. Incubus is a male demonic type figure that attacks women. A succubus is a female type demon that attacks men. This, fortunately, was not the case. She called it an entity. And when I went down, and it was perfect because it was a full moon that night. It was literally out in the middle of nowhere. I started the process of cleansing, going around with the sage and things like that. And after about, I would say maybe 30, 45 minutes, a man appeared in front of me, which resembled Colonel Sanders. And he told me his name. The house started to shake. I mean, this literally sounds unreal.
I understand.
I was afraid at that one. I really was afraid because I thought I've never dealt with anything at that point like that. The house began to shake, and it turns out this was the man that was the plantation owner way back in the day.
Ooh, yep.
Yeah, he did not want anybody on his property, and we literally argued, and I began to throw holy water in his direction. That's when the house started to shake, and I don't know if you're familiar with the big attic fans that when you turn it on, there's this big suction.
Yes.
Where you suck the air all up out of the house. Well, finally, that's the feeling that came about, and the curtains that were at her windows actually pulled out from the windows, and he went up. And the house immediately was calm. And her husband was in there watching a race. It was so funny because he said, "What are you doing in there?" That was the funny part. She was sitting on the little step that came down into that room, and she was just petrified. And then I looked at one of the windows, and there were these little black children with their hands pressed up against the window looking in. And I was just assuming that was the little slave children that was there. So as I went outside and did the final blessing to the house outside, because it was a full moon, dotted through the field there, you could see, I don't know how many slaves just standing. And I asked if they wanted to be released, and they said, "No, we're protecting the property." So we came back in, and she had done research, and he had told me his name, the plantation owner, and I was telling her what he had said. And sure enough, it was exactly who she had researched and found it was his property at one point. A couple of years later, I contacted her, and she said she never had any more issues. So that was scary. But it was, looking back on it, I really am glad I was able to experience that.
Yes, that's incredible. And so the rapes that had been occurring from the other side were him feeling he had dominion over his slaves, and just he was continuing with his abhorrent behavior with the living then. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of kind of these phenomenal paranormal events like that, what do you do as far as protection when you go in? Like, how do you prepare yourself to go in for a clearing?
Well, prior to leaving my house, and on the way, I'll do a meditation and ask for guidance. and then I will do a protective bubble type protection when I get there. I always bless myself with holy water. I guess that's the Catholic in me.
Mm-hmm.
But I always do that bubble of protection, and I try to reinforce it throughout.
Yeah.
And are so good. I haven't had any attachments. I haven't brought anything home. But I do protect myself in that particular way.
Yeah. I feel like I walk quietly and carry a big stick. I don't know if that was Roosevelt. I just feel like I don't want to provoke any entity. So I always am very humble when I go in there, not in terms of confidence, but just in terms of not, I want to assess the situation too. And I always ask my guides and angels for protection, because I've learned the hard way that when you push against something negative, guess what? You're pushing on it and you're attached to it. So it's ugly. So
It's true. That's why I do that bubble when I get there. And, in the station I will call in, my ancestors, whoever, angels, spirit guides, ascended masters. I ask them all to be with me and protect me.
Yes.
Point B and back. And then when I get there, I do that protective bubble.
Well, tell us another story. Tell us another story.
Another story? Okay. I could tell you a story of a seance that I did.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yes. Tell our listeners that aren't familiar with the term seance, they may have just some wild imagery in their, in their minds. So tell them what that practically is.
Practically, it's the way I do it. And I think everybody may have their own technique, but the way I do it is I get at least 8 people. I like to have an even number. That includes me. And we all join hands, and I say a protective prayer and ask for anyone that wants to come through only be of the light. And then I will always set up a recorder just in case we don't hear anything audibly, but we may catch it on the recorder.
Nice.
And we gather in a circle, and I have a candle in the center of the table. And sometimes the candle, like this one particular time, the candle went out. And it was a brand new candle, but it was obviously somebody blew it out.
Mm-hmm.
And
not one of the people at the table.
No. Well, back in the old days, after electricity, they had a lot of the people would use red light bulbs.
Uh-huh.
And I actually did one at a funeral home one time, and I had 16 people, which I found was too many.
Mm-hmm.
But red light bulbs in there. That was an interesting. We didn't actually hear anything. We heard, other than walking around, and you could hear somebody stand up and sit down in one of the leather chairs that was in the background. But it wasn't a person because there was enough light. But the one that I was getting ready to tell you about, it was a group of us, some of my family members and some friends were at my house. My mother came through my aunt, and she took on the image of my mother's face.
Oh, like a transfiguration?
Yes.
Excellent.
It was very, and then one of the other people, I'm trying to remember if it was her father or her grandfather, had a horse and buggy that she remembered as a child, and he came through and told her about that time. And then we had to take a break, and we were all sitting there, and one of the people had got up to go outside, and the chair that she was sitting in just flew out from the table and back into the further part of the kitchen.
Wow, that's some huge energy.
Yeah, it really was. That was intense. I've done several of those seances, but it's always. One lady told me after the one at the funeral home, she said, that felt like I went to church. Yeah, she said that was the most sacred thing.
Yes.
I always try to make it, comfortable for people because, they do get nervous and start giggling in the beginning.
Yeah.
Or screaming.
Oh,
but,
no!
it's usually within the first 15 minutes. You have to go through that little period of time to let them
Get
their nerves
settled.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one. I actually lived in a house that was haunted, and what brought the man back up was I did a seance in that house, and turns out he had died in the hallway, and I found out from one of the neighbors later that he was a very ugly, mean man. And I had to move. I lived there 8 months, and I had so many things happen in that house. It's too numerous to even go into, but it was just ridiculous. I had to move. I told my landlord I cannot stay here.
Just too much activity and
and it was, mean-spirited stuff.
Yeah, there's certain vibrations that you just don't want to mess with them. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It's just like, okay, that's your turf. Okay. But if you own the place, you have the right to occupy that place. But you don't want to tango with some of that stuff. Mm-mm.
No, recently I had a lady contact me that her and her partner were going to buy a house. And it was in the historic part of Lynchburg. My assistant Jennifer and I went down to go walk through with this couple with the real estate agent, because the real estate agent had said she would refuse to go back in there alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting house. Every time we came out of a room, she locked a deadbolt.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then under the door, you'd see the light come back on. And one of the lights had to be plugged in to turn it on. And we walked out, and she unplugged it. We all saw her unplug it. And we turned around to come out, and she turned around to close the door, and the light was plugged back in.
Mm-hmm.
I've been contacted quite a few times from people that are purchasing homes that want me to come and clear them.
Yes. It's a good thing for everyone to do if you move into an apartment or a rental home or a thing. Absolutely. What is your approach for that? Yeah.
I would just do it with the sage and the prayers, and I will go around with holy water and salt.
Mm-hmm.
If it's really negative, I will use frankincense and myrrh.
Yeah.
And it can take as little as 30 minutes and as long as 3 hours.
Yes.
Depending on how occupied it is, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Right. And how large the structure is. Sometimes when I do clearings for people, I do kind of like a house reading first, and then I have them do part of it. They get on the sage and the crystals or whatever. You're getting the spirits to leave and doing the clearing too.
Yeah, because usually when I do a house cleansing or a blessing, I will ask the people that live there or that are potential buyers or renters, I ask them to stay outside.
Okay.
There's no interference with their energy, and then I will cleanse them.
Do you feel like there's a certain, this sounds kind of strange, it kind of comes out of Christian tradition, but do you think there's sort of a certain authority that you have known that you have over that?
As a higher being, you mean, or from me?
I don't know. Like, I've always had spirits just obey. And I don't know, I think that that's because we have the right to dominate a physical space because we are in the physical body. But I've also kind of wondered whether some of us are more, I guess the old term would be anointed, to do that. What do you think?
I've never really given that much thought, to be honest with you. I usually just go in with, and I guess because, like I said before, because I had a Catholic background, I usually go with Jesus is one of the protectors, and I always call on God to help me.
Yeah.
And the other ascended masters that may be available. So I guess that will probably cover that.
Definitely. As far as protection for our listeners, do you have any hot tips that you want to drop before we close our show today?
I thought maybe I would give them the how I do the bubble protection if they'd like to try it for themselves, because I know people, when you go out into the world, you're always running across a lot of negative energy. You envision yourself in a thick bubble of white light and say to yourself, bubble of white protective light, guard my energy and my space as I walk through my day. Let any negativity that is sent my way from any source be reflected away and sent out into the universe to become a loving and caring energy. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. That's beautiful. Thank you, Teresa, for coming on the show. I will look.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. If you want to find Teresa, again, it's mystic-visions.webs.com. If you want to find me, it's medium Tracey Lockwood.com. And I just hope you enjoyed the show. We certainly did. Remember that it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, we have nothing.